Hey guys, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Life from the perspective of a military family member is way different than a civilian standpoint. Military children and family members give up their hopes and dreams to be able to stand by and support their service member, and it isn't an easy lifestyle for anyone to live. I hope that this podcast is able to help connect the military community and give others just a glimpse into what the military life is like from the perspective of spouses and children. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Today, I'm here with Zandra, who is a Army spouse. So hi, Zandra. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Gracie. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So kind of tell me a little bit, just like an overview of your journey as a military spouse and what it's been like for you.
All right. So my husband is now retired. So he is a retired Army officer. He completed 20 years in the military, and I was with him pretty much all of that time that he completed. We were actually high school sweethearts. We dated in high school, and then we broke up for about 4 years. I went to college. He kind of hung out. And then my first year teaching, I was in Georgia. We're both from Alabama. So I was in Georgia, and I woke up thinking about him one day and called his home, and he was like, I'm about to join the military. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So my first year teaching was his first year joining the military, and we just kind of reconnected at that point. And when he initially joined into the military, he only signed up for 2 years with college funds because he initially went to college when I went to college. He graduated a year before me from high school, but he kind of partied his way back home.
Yeah.
And so he signed up for military 2 years with college funds. So at the time I was teaching in Decatur, Georgia, and I had just gotten let's fast forward. So we got engaged, and then 2 years later, it's almost time for him to get out. And I had just recently gotten a student from Germany. And I had heard of Dodia and teaching for the military, and I knew students lived all over the world, but this was my first experience, my third year teaching with a student from Germany, a military-connected child. And so I got so excited, and I always wanted to travel the world. So I was like, no, don't get out of the military. I want to travel the world. I want to go to Germany. And that's basically what happened. So he re-enlisted to go to Germany. And so we moved in October. We got married June of 2000. October, we were in Germany. And my first part of the year there, I couldn't find a job because it was October. School had already started. And I just kind of worked for youth services. So I still had an opportunity to work with military-connected kids. I'm 25 and I'm all the way in Germany, and I don't know anyone. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this journey at this point because soldiers kind of know who they're working with. They get a buddy, have a battle buddy, they have meetings, they're going to lunch. And I'm in this country and I know no one. I don't have a job teaching. And I'm kind of in this space of okay, so what am I going to do?
Right.
And so I started reaching out. I'm in a sorority, so I started reaching out to my sorority sisters that were in Germany. I ended up meeting one and was able to volunteer in her classroom. And so I was able to start building my own connections because moving to a different country at such a young age can be very scary. And this is 2000, right? So we didn't have social media like we have today. I was sending emails and trying to figure it out. And along this route, I met many other military spouses that were just oh, I hate it here. I'm ready to go home. I don't do anything. I don't leave the house. So everyone, I can say, have a different journey. My journey was more of an exploration. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to work. I wanted to meet new people. So I found that I had to kind of do that on my own because my husband was kind of already connected. He had a sponsor. He had someone to take him around and show him things. And they have classes at ACS for spouses to join and that kind of thing. But still trying to find someone that you connect with can be very hard. But moving forward, I don't want to stay on this too long, but moving forward, I ended up getting a job at the school in our town, Schweifert. We were in Schweifert, Germany. It's now closed down. But I got a job there through connections with my sorority sister. I interviewed, got a job, and then found my own community of people that I can connect with. They had FRG meetings and that kind of thing, but it was still kind of nice knowing, like, I went to school to be an educator. So having friends that were educators and hanging out with educators was really nice for me because I don't know, I didn't know Army. When my husband and I got back together, he was in Texas and I was in Georgia, right? So I wasn't around the Army community. So it was kind of hard. Fast forward 5 years later, he thought he was going to get out of the military. So that was another experience. 9/11 had happened and he had gone to Iraq, and that was crazy within itself. Being overseas and being by yourself, and we still didn't have kids at the time, and waiting on phone calls. So being a military spouse can be very hard. And on top of that, I was a military connected teacher, I guess. So I taught military students. And so hearing about hardships that other military families were going through, or the fact that some kids had lost one of their parents, like that was hard within itself. But he came back and was like, I'm getting out of the military. I'm not going back to Iraq, you know? And so I was like, okay, I can stay with DODEA, which is Department of Defense schools. And they are pretty much in a lot of locations that military bases are in. And I got a transfer to Korea, and then he came on orders to be an instructor. So then he was like, well, I'm not getting out the military. You know, and I thought, well, I still want to go to Korea. And so one of the hardships, I think, of being a military spouse and this journey that we take is sometimes we kind of have to give up some of the things that we want to do, because the most important job is the job of the service member. Like, their job is to protect our country. And so as a support for them, we kind of have to take the back seat in some of our dreams and aspirations. But for this particular time, it's now 2005, I decided to keep my contract and go to Korea for a year. It was only a year contract. I was still working with Department of Defense schools, but I only did a year, and then I joined him in Fort Benning, Georgia. So we were there for about 5 years. He then moved to Fort Drum. I had to make another decision because now we had a baby, and then I was pregnant. And so we decided that I would stay in Fort Benning and he would go to Fort Drum. He was only there a year because he dropped his officer packet and ended back up at Fort Benning. So when you're on this roller coaster ride as a military spouse, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to stay together? Are we going to move? Are we going to, what are we going to do to make sure that we stay a strong unit and, we're there to support each other?
Yeah.
So I decided to stay put at Fort Benning. He was only gone for a year, and we saw each other in between time. And then he was back at Fort Benning for officer candidate school. After that, we moved to Fort Stewart. We then went to Fort Lee, Virginia. And then he was at the point where he was thinking about retiring. And then at that point, I guess we were maybe 16 years into our marriage at that point. And so I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity for me to go back into DODEA and work, for the Department of Defense schools again. I had worked for them in Fort Stewart, and I just felt at home around military connected kids because I had my own kids. They felt a connection with students that were growing up like them. It wasn't awkward to be moving from place to place every couple of years or so. And I felt like it was my passion not only to help kids, but to kind of help military connected kids and really be involved in that community. So I completed an application to work for DODEA again. And then I had the opportunity to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where I worked with Navy families. And then we went to Bahrain, where I worked with Navy families more. And now we're in Fort Campbell, Kentucky or Tennessee. And so he's retired now. He's been retired since 2018. And so he followed me for a while, but now we're back at an Army base and we feel at home. So this military spouse journey has been a big roller coaster with a lot of ups and downs. But through it all, I've met some amazing people and have found that some of my closest friends are military spouses or military connected people. But that's kind of our journey. And we're here today. So we've been married now 22 years. And we have two daughters, a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, who have experienced the military life, the ups and downs of it, the hardships, and now they're trying to get settled into a military town that's really not a military town, because a lot of the people here, from what I hear from them, is a lot of the kids, maybe parents retired out of Fort Campbell. And so then they just stay here and they haven't experienced the moving from place to place. And so they're trying to find their niche in this place that we're living now.
Yeah, it's definitely, an incredible journey. And, a lot of people experience so many different things and so many different journeys. And, the military life can take you, all the way around the world, which just sounds like in your case that did happen.
Yes.
And, it's just incredible to see different journeys that everyone goes on and different experiences, that everyone has.
It is. It's amazing. It is amazing. It can be hard. Yes. And you kind of have to let go of some of the things that maybe you wanted to do, because sometimes you have to remind yourself, like, this is not about me as being a military spouse. Like, this is about the service member, and my job right now is really to just be of support for the service member. But a lot of times I feel that you could lose yourself because you're so supportive and you get so involved into the military lifestyle that you forget, like, who you were before you were a spouse.
Yeah. And you sacrifice so much. Like, I don't want to take anything away from the service members and the amount that they sacrifice and everything. But, transitioning into this role as a military spouse in my position and seeing all these military spouses and having them all on the podcast and talking to them, you really see the amount that the spouses sacrifice as well. And, I knew how much kids sacrificed, and I know how much kids sacrifice, but you see how much spouses sacrifice and giving up jobs, moving away from your family. Like, it's insane and incredible, the strength that, these spouses carry, and, how much they pull, in the relationship to say, this is worth it. Like, I look at my fiance and I'm like, this is worth it. Like, us being apart, the distance, this is worth it, kind of thing. And it's so worth it. It's so true.
It is. Yeah. And it gets you used to, so you guys are separated right now. He's in a different location. And it kind of gets you used to the in and out. Because I feel like when Cedric and I had been married for 20 years, we had been, half of our marriage, we had been separated due to like a field rotation or training or school or deployment. And so you kind of get used to it and you flow, like it becomes a flow. When kids come into the picture, it gets a little harder because some things are different when dad is home versus when dad is not home. And so they have a lot of readjusting to do. And then spouses with the reintegration process, like when you're so used to doing things a certain way and all on your own. And then when your spouse comes home and then you have to retrain your brain, like, okay, like my husband is home and he can help with this. So it's a lot. We carry a lot. I think, but in the end, I think it's worth it.
It is.
But we do make sacrifices too. Yes.
Yeah, definitely not, putting our lives on the line, every day, but, in totally different ways, we make so many sacrifices as well. Even, at fiance status, like, it is a sacrifice still. So, but you have created a platform for yourself, and tell me about that, how it all started, what your idea for that was, and how, you're sharing the journeys of other people as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking me about it. So
yes,
COVID hit and my family and I are now in Bahrain. So we're in the Middle East. A lot of people are like, where is Bahrain? Well, it's right next door to Saudi Arabia. So we're in Bahrain and I'm working as a teacher for military connected kids. And my husband is now working for the Navy at this point. He's retired and my girls are in school. And they shut down, just like they shut down all over the world. But I felt like it was kind of different in Bahrain because it's a kingdom, right? And the king says, like, do not leave your house or you cannot be out without a mask. you can be out without a mask. And so my youngest daughter was very into social media, and I wasn't feeling it because I feel sometimes like social media is too much for young ones,
Yes,
too much
I
for
totally
adults
understand.
sometimes.
Oh my gosh,
But I
yes.
thought, so at first I was like, okay, so maybe we can get a channel together. We could do TikTok together, and we could show what we're doing. We're a military family living overseas. And so it kind of started that way. And my girls are Ryan and Riley. So I kind of call them R Square.
Yeah.
So they're R Square. And then I was like, and we can do R Square Life, and we can, start doing all these different things. And then one day I was in the shower, and I feel like God speaks to me when I'm in the shower. Well, let me back up a bit. So my girls are very different. I felt like my youngest girl always went with the flow. She was fine wherever we moved. If I said, oh, we're going to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, first we were going to retire in Virginia. And then I'm like, no, we're going to Gitmo, I felt like my youngest was like, okay, great. And my oldest was like, why do we have to move again? Dad is retiring.
Yeah.
I just want to be in a location where I can meet friends, I can grow up. I'm not the odd man out. Like my oldest have always struggled with PCSing from one location to the next. So now we're in Bahrain, and we moved to Bahrain her 8th grade year. And it was hard. It was the last year of her middle school years. And so that was another hard transition. And now we're shut down. So not only did she not want to be there, but now COVID has happened, and I'm going through all of these things with her and trying to figure out how to better help her. And at the same time, I'm meeting families where kids are having a hard time. I was a first grade teacher at the time, and, I met so many different parents along the way, but specifically now they were nervous about, number one, being at a school in the Middle East, right? Yeah. Number two, sometimes their kids were having a hard time adjusting to this new place. And so one night I was in the shower, and God just kind of poured on me. I have a friend that has written a book before, and I used to tell her, oh, you should write a book about this. You should write a book about that. Like, I'm not a writer. Like, I can come up with
you have the ideas.
Yeah, I thought, somebody else needs to execute it, but, you should write a book about that. But when I was in the shower, and God just kind of poured into me and kind of gave me this book idea. And it was basically like for military connected kids and families to understand PCS season, right? Because it was around December, and that's one of our major PCS seasons, which is a time when like a vast majority of military families move, like in the spring and in the wintertime. I don't know if it's because, there are big school breaks, but when a big majority of families move, we tend to call it PCS season. And so I wanted to tell the story of the ups and downs of being a military kid, but I wanted to start from a location of what does it even mean? And so I kind of wrote several ideas down. And when I came up with the manuscript and started with all of that of publishing this first book, I thought, well, I need a company idea name. So our company is Our Square. So R Square, but Our Square. So the four of us together is Our Square. And so my website is oursquarejourney.com. So www.oursquarejourney.com. And on my website, I have an opportunity to sell my book. I have a copy right here. That one has a glare, but it's called PCS season. So I sell my book on the website, and I also
love that.
Thought about having people share their journeys on the website. And so it's called Our Journey. So everything on the website is ours. So it's our book. It's Our Square, right? So it's our books, our journeys, because Riley, my youngest, was like, my square plus your square equals our square, right? Aww. And so if other people are sharing their journeys on the website, then it helps and encourages, inspires other people, regardless of what their journey is. Yeah. So it pretty much kind of started in COVID, and me just wanting to share what PCS season was all about. And it gave me an opportunity in the first book, which is what I have right here. The first book is just PCS season. It's a little girl who's in kindergarten trying to figure out, I know winter, spring, summer, and fall, but what's PCS season, right? So she's in school, and her teacher is like talking to them, and her teacher in the book is actually another Dodia school. I know you're a military connected child. Did you go attend Dodia schools?
I think
when you were a kid?
When I've only been to one base. I lived on one post Army post. And it was Fort Sam Houston. And we had Fort Sam Houston Independent School District as our school system.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's connected or not.
I think that Fort Sam Houston is in Texas, correct?
Yes.
Is that Texas? Okay.
Yes, San Antonio.
So I think what happened in Texas is they were WDS schools maybe at some point, but the state has control over those schools. So it's not a Department of Defense school.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. But it's like DOD teachers and stuff who work there.
And it's only military connected kids, correct?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the teacher in the book is also a military teacher, connected kids teacher, and she's in Germany. Just people that I've met along the way. Another teacher that my daughter had, I tried to include people that we knew. But the first story is all about, well, what does this even mean? And so it gives an example, or it goes through like, when do soldiers move and what does that mean for the kid, and why it can be rewarding. And I also talk about it can be sad and why it can be sad. And so it's the perfect book to get kids to understand what PCSing is all about. And it doesn't even have to be a military connected kid, because sometimes we're in regular public schools where I had my first military connected kid. And so their friends need to understand, like, well, why are they moving? And, you know, a lot of times we grow up and we stay in the same location, but they're in and out. And so it helps students understand, like, what is this all about? And it's the perfect book to help with transitions. And so that's the first book I wrote. The second book, I don't have a copy of, but it's in formatting right now. And hopefully it will be out by September. Because all I have to do at that point after it's approved is like upload it to Amazon KDP. But that story is called It's PCS Season Again. And it comes from a different perspective. This one is more lower elementary. The other one is upper elementary. And it talks mainly about the hardships that students go through. So it's based more from my oldest perspective. Like, why are we moving again? You said we were going to retire, and I don't want, like, it's that perspective. And then it goes through all of the steps that you can do to give you tools to help you with the transition. And so that kind of all started during COVID. And I am trying to get it up off the ground and help people along the way. So thank you for asking about that.
Yes, no, it's so great to get, you know, the word out there about, you know, resources for kids and families that, you know, would not be heard of otherwise, or, you know, like one share makes a huge difference, and you never know, you know, who is going to see that. And, you know, it could explode off of, you know, one thing. So I always love to take opportunities to, you know, not only learn about, you know, resources that I can use, you know, myself, or, you know, when I have kids, like, you know, down the road and stuff, but, you know, share other people's resources, because you never know when someone else is going to need it too.
Right. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yes.
So on the website, I did try to involve the whole family. And so you get kind of a look at all of us and who we are and kind of how we work together. But I'm still building it. It's been a year. So I'm still trying to get it up and going. So I would love for anyone that's listening or watching to check it out. There's a part on there that says Our Journey. And if you click on it, and if you have a journey that you would like to share that can encourage or inspire someone else to keep going, I would love to hear from you. So if you feel inclined to do so, I would love it. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll put a link in like the description and everything so people can find it there too. But one other thing is I always like to ask to end the podcast of what is one piece of advice that you would give to another military spouse?
Oh, wow.
The hardest question of them all.
I think the best piece of advice I could give is to always communicate, right? And sometimes you need other people to help you with that communication. Like I'm a school counselor now, so I'm a big advocate for therapists. All of us in my family have gone to therapists. I'm now in Clarksville looking for therapists now for my girls, because it's always needed someone outside of the family dynamics that you can talk to. And sometimes we don't always know how to communicate with each other, especially when reintegrations are happening and your spouse has been out of the house for a while. You're talking on the phone or via chat, but it's not the same when they come back into the house. So just always being aware of how each other is feeling and making sure that you communicate with each other. I can say that that is the best advice that I can give. And if you need other people to come in to help you communicate, I would take advantage of that, because the military provides so many different resources for you on post with ACS, the Military One Source. Like, there's so many free resources for you to use. And I would utilize those as much as possible so that communication can stay open.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And, there are so many resources, like you said, that, are there to help. So why not use them?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing, your journey and, sharing the journeys of others along the way too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Gracie. I look forward to talking with you again and following you as you continue your journey as a military spouse. Congratulations again on that.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Make sure to set a reminder for every Tuesday to listen to a new episode. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Grace of a Military Child and Life. If you have any questions or want to be on the podcast, send a message to one of our social media platforms or email grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. See you next week.